Welcome, Greek U Nation, to episode number 275 of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Ayalon, CEO of Greek University. I'm a speaker and a two-time author. Our second book is called From Letters to Leaders, Redefining New Member Education and Leveraging Belonging to Eliminate Hazing. Go and pick up that book today on Amazon. We call these episodes the Fraternity Foodie Podcast because there is nothing like great food to bring fraternity and sorority leaders together. Fun fact, we have added much more resources to our speaking team for sexual assault prevention programming. We've got Jamie Devin Wilson, who has been doing a wonderful job for many years. We also now have Dr. James Wilkerson and Kimberly Corbin on the team as well to give their perspectives, their resources to students all over the country. Now, the U.S. Department of Education issued new proposed Title IX regulations in June of 2022. When finalized, these new regulations are going to make sweeping changes to the current regulations' definitions of sexual harassment, scope of coverage, and procedural requirements. So stay tuned as we bring new programs and new resources for your campuses. Now, we have a couple of guests from the legal side on our show today, and they are going to help us shed a light on Title IX investigations, student disciplinary matters, as well as current policies and training to navigate all of these Title IX cases. So we are going to start with Susan Stone. Her life's work is to help students in crisis and to meet their legal needs. Recognizing the need for legal services dedicated to protecting students, professors, and individuals with disabilities, Susan handles matters ranging from special education issues to student disciplinary matters and, of course, Title IX investigations. Susan has the knowledge and the experience required to navigate due process complaints and also the shaping of 504 plans and individualized education programs. She handles student matters involving hazing, bullying, and social media, and she's gained a national reputation for representing students and professors in these Title IX cases. She's routinely hired as a student advisor and a Title IX attorney for the campus investigation and hearing phase of proceedings. She's also retained to handle subsequent university level appeals. Now, we also have with us Christina Suppler, who has achieved great success protecting students and professors in these campus Title IX proceedings, which has also garnered her a national reputation. Her services are particularly sought after to navigate Title IX cases involving a parallel criminal investigation. And in addition to being a skilled Title IX attorney, Christina also helps students of all ages facing academic misconduct, research misconduct, and other types of discipline. Additionally, she is certified in restorative justice and has worked to guide students through informal resolution, including mediation and restorative justice. Welcome to the show, Susan and Christina.
Yay, thanks for having us.
Of course. Are you kidding me, man? We definitely need to hear the legal side of it. You know, we get so entrenched in the educational side of it. Certainly, we spend a lot of time on prevention. We want to make sure that it doesn't even happen in the first place. But you know what? Listen, there's certainly a need for legal services for students, for professors. All of this, there is a really big need. So I'm so happy that you're on the show to share your expertise with us. And I think for our audience, it's important to know kind of your background and get to know you a little bit. So Christina, we'll start with you. You decided on one of my favorites, Boston University, BU, for your undergraduate experience. Really interesting story. We actually just came back from Boston where both of my kids went to tour the campus, and they have a brand new skyscraper, tallest building in all of Boston, just for the data science department. I mean, they've got a lot of money and they're throwing it at, data science and some of these emerging majors and things like that. So I'm wondering, Christina, what made you choose BU?
BU, why did I choose BU? I guess looking back in high school, I loved my high school. I had a wonderful experience, but I went to an all-girls Catholic high school. And so of course it was not the most diverse environment. And again, I loved it. Those are some of the best memories I have in life. But looking on to college, I wanted to broaden my experiences, meet people from different walks of life. I also wanted to be in a more urban environment. And so visited schools all over the country, and BU just felt like it was the right place. And now reflecting back, it was such a wonderful place for me to be that sort of set me up to launch for the rest of my life.
I have to join in on that because Christina shared with me early on in our business partnership that when she went to BU, she was thought of as being sporty.
I was the outdoor person in my friend group, which if you knew me, that's
it's really funny.
But yes, compared to many of the fancy East Coast folks that I sort of fell in with, yes, I was the sporty girl from Ohio.
She was sporty spice.
That's right.
Sporty spice.
Sporty
I love
spice.
it. I love it. I love it. I love the campus. I tell you what, I mean, they've got the subway running right through campus, so you can get to downtown. I mean, you can get really anywhere in that kind of an urban environment. And I really love the student population. I mean, there really is a very diverse population at BU. I mean,
Absolutely.
they have students coming from all different countries. I mean, hundreds of countries. And
Literally all over the
descending
world.
all over the
Right.
world. I mean, it is about as international a student population as you can get. And
ironically, my daughter went to Northeastern. So if you're headed out to the Boston area, you should take a look at the Huskies too.
Yeah, I probably should. Listen, I mean, if I had to do it all over again, it's hard to say, where I would end up. But Susan, you know what? You decided on Miami University, which is beautiful, absolutely stunning campus. And you also joined Alpha Phi, which, is very interesting to our listeners. What made you choose Miami? And then of course, Alpha Phi.
Well, first of all, I'm first generation to go to college. And for me, I didn't have a lot of guidance. So I didn't really think beyond Ohio. And at the time, before Ohio State was the Ohio State, Miami was the place to go. Now they really run neck and neck, depending on who you ask. So it was, for me, I wanted to get the best education possible in state, because I was footing the bill and did a lot of jobs and took loans and worked my way through. And when I got to Miami, it's still to this day predominantly Greek. Sororities and fraternities. It is Mother Miami for a reason. But I picked Alpha Phi not just because of the teddy bear being the mascot, the Alpha Phi bear, but because at the time I really perceived it as being the most diverse. And I look back, I mean, by diverse, I was the Jewish girl in the sorority. Okay, there really was no diversity. But at the time, I thought that was very diverse.
I got it. There's a lot of really good people watching at Miami University. A lot of students will just be like kind of, laid out on the front lawn, even on the roof of their houses, just kind of watching people going to class and coming and going. And it's a beautiful campus. You're absolutely right. I mean, it is the birthplace for fraternities as far as I'm concerned. And so a lot of national organizations got their start there at Miami University. So tons of history, a thriving Greek system. And so I can't say enough good things about the fraternity and sorority community there and just how beautiful the campus is.
And I will say that being in a sorority has really helped inform Christina and I in the work we do. Because we do.
Absolutely. Because I BU Greek life is essentially non-existent. I mean, I don't know if it's changed since I went there, but I was not in a sorority. It wasn't really even anything on my radar in college. It's just not the type of campus BU was. But Susan's experience, I think, has really been important for a variety of cases that we've handled in representing students across the country.
Just understanding what it is to be in a sorority, what it is to have a big sister, that process, the pledge process, the rush process. I mean, if you don't go through it, it's really hard to understand what it means to go through that rush process and the nerves and the tears and the hopes and the dreams and
the bonding too, right?
Bonding. I mean, this is so funny. I am 56 and my big sister lives in the Cleveland area. And when I see her, I still introduce her as my big sister. Is that funny? How ridiculous is that? But you get it.
Yeah.
She'll always be Big Liz. Shout out to you, Liz.
I totally get it. I think, I'm effective because I also understand that process. To be even just a speaker, an educator, I mean, you really have to understand the values of the organization in order to sometimes have them take a look at the oath that they made, the commitment that they made to live their life a certain way. And then hopefully that makes, better choices for them, not only while they're at college, but really for a lifetime.
What
Because
fraternity were you in, Mike?
so I joined Sigma Pi at the University of Buffalo, and of course, I'm sure you know about them at Miami. So
No, they weren't there at Miami, but I
weren't
do
there,
know, wasn't
yes.
that rooted in the South Sigma Pi? Am
No,
I
no,
correct?
not
No?
rooted in the South at all.
Mm.
Actually, established at Vincennes University in Indiana, and very much a Northeast heavy fraternity. Have a lot of chapters out in California. I mean, in New Jersey, I think they're like Starbucks. I mean, they're on every street corner in New Jersey. So, it just, I think they're now, of course, at Miami, Ohio, and doing very well. But yeah, I think you're right. I think they're one of the newer groups. But a lot of the established groups, even the ones that started at Miami, Ohio, some of them are not even there because of risk management problems. So, they're no longer on campus.
True that. True
You
that.
know? So anyway, so we can talk forever about fraternity and sorority life. There's no question about that. So Christina, you've garnered this national reputation for defending students and professors in Title IX proceedings. And we've spent so much time on this podcast talking about consent and bystander intervention. So from an attorney's perspective, what are your thoughts on these two areas? Do you think that's where we should be focusing educational initiatives on college campuses today?
Well, for starters, consent, get it, right?
It's that simple, isn't it?
It is that simple. But actually, in all seriousness, more recently, I think that parents, lawyers, educators, I mean, Susan and I talk to students across the country every day. And really what we're seeing is there's a greater awareness about consent among students. But I think it's important that students understand that consent is a starting point. It's not an end point. And so greater awareness about consent is important. Bystander intervention, of course, that's always something that all adults should be encouraging college students to think about. But those two issues in and of themselves, I mean, it's not going to cure all the issues that happen out there, but they're good starting points. I mean, Susan and I have been working in this space since 2011, and it's nice to see how far we've come in terms of educating college students about consent and responsible social interaction with sex, partying, you name it. But there's still a bit of a way to go.
When you talk about bystander intervention, that's just a fancy name for be a good friend, be a good citizen. If you see somebody is really, really, really drunk, get them home, right? If you see someone, approach someone who's really, really drunk and you don't think it's going to end in a way that it should according to the school's policy, get that person home. Common sense, right?
I mean, I would say in so many of our cases, again, whether it's student misconduct, Title IX, something with Greek life, because we handle all those types of matters. At the heart of it is the notion, as Susan said, of essentially just be a nice person, have good manners, treat other people the way you'd want to be treated.
True that.
I think that's great advice. And I mean, that's really in line with what fraternity and sorority members commit to at the altar when we join our organizations, is to truly be a good person and to look out for one another. I mean, I think that ultimately is, the benefit of being in a fraternity and sorority is that you have other eyes and ears that are on you that should be watching what's going on. And if we see something that looks wrong to us, it's up to us to step up and state something.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Well, good. So I think at least we're on the right track. Listen, I agree with you. I think that, as an educator in this area, I do think that we've come a long way. And I started talking about these issues in 2012, much before the Me Too movement and everything else that has happened subsequently. But certainly, I think we've come a long way. And now we're starting to get to the point where there's peer-to-peer education, where we're actually seeing students educating other students and really seeing the fraternity and sorority community coming out as leaders in this area to kind of dictate what is acceptable and what is not acceptable within our community. And so I think we're making steps, but I agree with you. We still have a long way to go. So. So there's that. Now, Susan, you're very concerned about condemnation on college campuses without due process. And I think that's totally fair. I mean, due process is the foundation of our legal system here in the United States. And one of the issues that I'm seeing is that students want justice when they see like a yik yak comment, which is totally anonymous app, about a sexual assault at a particular fraternity house, but the university doesn't even have a complaint or a report or any paperwork at all on this incident. So can you talk about the importance of due process and why an anonymous yik yak report could be a very dangerous thing?
Well, look, you obviously have been looking at our social media because Christina and I spend a lot of time talking about cancel culture. We even had, I think it was a couple years ago, right during the pandemic, 2 high school students, one pro cancel culture saying that what a good thing it is.
Oh, on our podcast, Real Talk. Yeah, that was those
Real
were,
Talk
yeah.
on our podcast. And then the other student talking about the dangers. We're seeing the pendulums swing too far the other way, Mike, where before people weren't really taking bystanders intervention seriously. Now, anytime there's a hint of something that smells of sexual assault, without even talking to the other person, that person, based on rumor, is getting canceled. And what does that look like? Well, I'm going to tell you what it looks like. We've had students who literally get asked to leave their fraternity based on a rumor.
Without even having had the opportunity to say that's not true. Here's what happened.
Right. They, without even Title IX being involved, get asked to leave sports teams, being completely ostracized by peer groups, and being the subject of internet cyberbullying and doxing. We had a case where we represented 2 young men, and people were spreading all over the internet rumors that they had committed sexual assault. And we filed complaints against those students once we discovered their identities. And when we cross-examined those students, they admitted that they were not only not at the party where our clients were at, but they didn't even know people who were at the party. They were basically taking a game of telephone. I heard from a person who heard who was there, allegedly, and then spreading it as being truth. And the consequences were disastrous. Our clients had their families' addresses posted on the internet, and they were scared for their parents' lives.
Threats, yeah,
There
threatening
were
calls, and the parents. Not only did the students have to endure, the parents had some backlash as well. And these students couldn't move freely through campus. They couldn't even feel safe in their own dorm rooms.
It was a mob mentality, and due process is there to prevent mobs. Whether it was the days of the Salem witch trials, whether it was what happened in the South when there were lynchings, due process prevents mobs from taking over. And we need to make sure that accused students have notice and an opportunity to be heard, an opportunity to view evidence against them, and an opportunity to cross-examine witnesses to test the credibility of the people making accusations. Students should not just listen to a rumor and go try to cancel someone out. We know of many cases where sorority women went to a fraternity and basically said, if you don't ask this person to leave, I will go to Title IX.
And it will never do events with you again. That sort of the groups mixing. They didn't want to do that either.
And that's really frightening. Now, there are situations, of course, there is sexual assault. It happens, but it needs to be handled in a way that ensures the integrity of the process, because we don't want innocent people being falsely accused and punished.
Yeah, you bring up some good points.
Guarantee of truth.
You bring up some good points. I mean, you're both attorneys and you're well trained in due process. I think college students especially ones that are not necessarily entering the legal profession, they might not be as familiar with due process. And I think that education needs to happen. And then, we can also talk about transparency and other things, and we can get to that. So, let's continue the conversation. Maybe it goes to this, Christina, many campuses right now are trying to adjudicate these cases. What are the issues with a college campus trying to adjudicate these cases outside of, let's say, the legal system? What are the unintended consequences there?
Well, look, colleges and universities are in the business of educating students, and they're really good at that most of the time, not always. With respect to Title IX, the federal government has imposed obligations on schools to address and respond to sexual assault. And that's a really good thing. I think we can all agree that's a good thing. But it's the way and it's what that response looks like that becomes problematic at times. Colleges and universities aren't so good at investigating allegations and making findings of fact, adjudicating cases.
We're sitting on hearing panels. Now, look, we have a national practice. We see colleges all over the country, and we have seen colleges over the years get better and better at their job. And there are some wonderful Title IX directors across the country. And when it goes well, the process works. But
a lot of the time it doesn't go well. We've time and again had cases where we joke, but it's actually not funny at all. The IT dude, the tech guy, is making the decision as to whether a policy was violated or not, or a dorm director, no disrespect at all, not slighting a dorm director or director of residential life in any way, but is that person really qualified and trained to investigate, gather evidence in a neutral manner and evaluate student credibility? I'm sorry, I just don't think that someone who takes a 2-day training class offered by an organization is qualified to really investigate these cases and make decisions that have potentially life-altering consequences for students.
You're making some great points.
Yeah,
I mean, if we go on, let's continue this conversation here, Susan. Another issue that I alluded to is that students are really kind of looking for transparency from the administration, and they don't feel like they're getting transparency. And this can be very frustrating for the students when some of these cases start to pile up. So what can campuses do to be more transparent in these cases to the student body, if anything?
Well, the question is, what does transparency mean? If it means that students are entitled to know whether a particular student is being disciplined, there are federal statutes that colleges and universities have to comply with, such as FERPA, that prevents colleges from releasing that information, because each student at a university is entitled to a right to privacy. Just like when you go to the doctor as a patient, there are HIPAA rights. There has to be some privacy protection, because what if a student at the end of the process is found not responsible? They have the right to re-enter the college community and resume their life. Now, there are statutes like the Clery Act that require colleges to report crime statistics. And students have access on most colleges' websites to those crime statistics and to see what's going on a particular campus. So I think colleges, by virtue of these federal laws, are doing a better job at being transparent. But I don't think it's the same as a criminal trial. And I would love my partner to speak of that, where there is a public right to attend a criminal trial. But remember, in juvenile proceedings are closed. What do you think, Christina?
Yeah, I think it's hard for students and parents, for that matter, whose child is going through any sort of student misconduct process, to understand that in the education setting, you don't have an absolute right to know everything. So students might be disciplined differently, and the school doesn't really have to tell you, and that's hard. It's really hard at times. So the lack of transparency, Susan and I are huge advocates and believers in transparency, but it just there's sometimes limitations that are beyond anyone's control. And again, we're sort of circling back to this idea. It's really easy to compare college campuses in Title IX and the criminal justice system and to draw parallels and analogies, but in reality, they are entirely different systems, entirely different laws, procedures, constitutional protections. And so that's, I think, in part why we sort of come up with this label that's been thrown around over the years that sadly has truth in it. The idea of Title IX cases at times being kangaroo courts. There's not total transparency.
And I just want to add, just when Christine and I are really well versed on the federal regulations, another administration comes in and the rules are constantly changing. Courts are constantly
on a daily basis. There's opinions.
daily, yeah. And so we always say it's dangerous when students and parents hire attorneys who dabble in this space, because there isn't a day that there isn't a new federal case that comes out. We stay on top of the regulations, and we ourselves have to redefine what transparency is. And we are all obligated to follow the law. Hope that helps you.
It does. It really does. And you're right. I mean, I think, the common student, might not really understand FERPA and why that's important. So again, it's an education, right? We're talking about education on due process. We're talking about education on FERPA. And, it really, I mean, I think that's kind of what's lacking, is a really good understanding of those two pieces. And maybe if students had a better understanding of those two pieces and why they're important to the foundation of our country, then, perhaps we can make some headway there. Now, Christina, you're obviously involved in a lot of these types of cases. And, we don't have to go into specifics of cases, but I think you're starting to see kind of the lay of the land there. And maybe in looking at so many cases, maybe you can dissect them and figure out, okay, what went wrong? What would have prevented this from happening in the first place? So in your opinion, what can fraternities and sororities do about the culture on college campuses today in order to prevent these types of issues from happening in the future?
I'm making a visual, Mike.
Look, not every Title IX case or student misconduct case involves alcohol or drugs, but oftentimes substance abuse or substances, let's say, play a role. I would say in general, that's a really good question, and I'm really glad that you brought that up. Susan and I are huge proponents of it's okay to have fun, but we're not saying don't party, don't have fun, but just do it in a safe way. And there's a way to have fun responsibly. And so I do think that colleges, fraternities and sororities can sort of lead the path on the forefront of demonstrating and exhibiting for other students how to have parties, events, where students are having a blast, they're having a great time, but it's not out of control. They're doing so in a responsible way. We're not saying don't have fun, don't drink. We're realistic about what goes on in college, but there's ways to make things more safe.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I agree completely. Listen, I have the same stance. I'm not naive enough to think that college students are not going to drink alcohol. I know they're going to drink alcohol. So my job is to show them how to do that safely. And I think there are things that we can think about before we go out. I think there are things that we can think about at the event. And then I think there are things we can think about when we leave the event to make sure that all of us get home safely, because that is ultimately the goal. And so I train students on how to have a safe event and what things we need to be thinking about before we go out. So for example, before we go out, if the three of us are going out, let's all decide on a drink limit and basically say, okay, this is how many drinks we are deciding that we are going to have tonight, and then actually track that through the event to make sure that we're actually sticking to what we said. And there's going to be accountability between the three of us, because if you see me go to grab, beer number 4 or whatever it is, you'd be like, Mike, this is more than we talked about, right? And holding us accountable to that. And then when we all go back home, making sure that all three of us are coming home together. If one of us is missing, where is that person? Right? I mean,
that's huge. Yeah. You go together, leave together, or have a plan, right?
Have a plan.
Just have
And
a
execute
plan and
that
talk
plan.
about that plan before we go out, right? And then
Right.
maybe have some food before we go out so we're not drinking.
Oh,
anything.
you said Susan's biggest thing now is that kids have parties and no one has food. You
No one
have
has
to have food.
Oh my gosh, you are
You're
speaking,
speaking
you're
her
speaking my
language.
language. Fraternity foodie. First thing, food is everything to me. I wake up thinking of my next meal, and on Monday, I'm planning Friday's dinner.
Right.
But it makes me, it's just inhospitable. I'm always saying, asking
A chip,
questions.
a nosh,
chip, a
something.
nosh. You need to nosh. What is wrong with having a little chip and dip, some
Right.
candy? Be a nice host and hostess. A
Mhm.
pizza.
A few pretzels.
Okay,
That's
I
what
just want to
potato chips.
share, I rolled out of my freshman year, okay? I had the freshman 15, but it was fun. It was fun. I'm telling you, Miami, Ohio has some great food.
Yeah.
But I'm a big believer, eat while you drink.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. Too many times they're going out on an empty stomach. And then obviously this is a problem. This leads to all kinds of issues. So I agree with you. If you're a good host, put out food. That is the right way to treat your guests. I mean, you and I, we would never have a party at our house and not serve any food. What do you mean? There's no food. We're going to have a couple of drinks and we're going to have some food at the same time. I mean, that's the right way.
If you're in Cleveland, Mike, you are welcome to dinner. I have to tell you.
I'm coming over. Believe me, I know you can
I
cook.
will feed you well.
I know you would. I'll be there in a heartbeat because just like you, I also plan my meals like the day before. So
No
hence
shame
the
in that.
fraternity
No
food.
shame.
I mean, come on, we're definitely cut from the same cloth. Now, Susan, if a student discloses a sexual assault to another student, what, in your opinion, should that student do with this information, and how should they handle the situation?
Well, first of all, I want to reframe this.
Mhm.
Student doesn't have to necessarily do anything, but be a good listener and be respectful of the person. The first question should be, how can I be helpful to you? What do you need? Do you need a sounding board? Do you need a shoulder to cry on? Would you like me to take you to the hospital for a rape kit to be taken upon you? Do you want to go to the police and make a police report? Do you want to go to Title IX? What I don't think should happen is that the person should presume what the other person needs and then go rogue on that friend and report it without their consent. Because other students, third parties can set a process in motion that maybe the victim does not want to, or is ready to have happen.
I mean, we say there's a lot of gray in the issues that we're tackling. Very rarely is something, absolute one way or the other. And so sometimes students just have to, I think that's beautiful what you said, Susan. Ask, how can I help you?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially after an incident like this, I think somebody who is a victim, they want to be in control of how the rest of the story plays out. And if you're removing it for them without their consent, now they didn't have consent that night and they don't have consent in how the rest of the story plays out, which is not what you want to do. And also, if you hear about a sexual assault and somebody discloses this to you, as a student, it's not your job to investigate the matter either. You're not an investigator. You're a student at the college. So leave that investigation to the authorities, the legal system, to go and do that if the student decides that that is the best resolution for them. So I think the student should be the one to decide. Whoever is the victim in this case, they should decide how the rest of the story goes. It's really up to them. Now, so all of this I think is really good. One last question, Christina, talk to us a little bit about the resources that are available for both the victim and also the accused.
Fortunately, there's an abundance of resources. Campuses do a really nice job now making students aware of those resources. So for victims and survivors, there's of course rape crisis centers across the country. Accused students, there's organizations like FACE, Families Advocating for Campus Equality, that provide support groups for students going through the process or have been through the process to talk to each other. And then also I just think mental health services in general. I think it's really important for adults, educators, families to encourage therapy. So I will say that it seems in recent years, schools have really come a long way in pumping out information to make students aware of those resources. God forbid they need them.
Well, Title IX offices usually will point their students to different sorts of resources, I should also say, and offices of disabilities should accommodations be needed.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
That's brilliant. Yeah, absolutely. Those are all the best resources that I can think of. So I love that. Thank you so much for sharing all of that information. Now, Susan, I can see that you are quite the foodie, just like me. And I do get to Cleveland every so often to speak on a college campus. So I need a new restaurant recommendation. Is there a restaurant in town maybe that you and Christina tend to visit because you just love the food?
Oh my gosh, you have to go to Felice. Do you like food with a little Latin flavor to it?
Listen, I like all food. I don't discriminate.
Too. Okay, so if you go to Felice, first thing, the cocktails are great. Speaking of drinking, the best. They have wonderful hanger steak for those who are beef eaters, a really good salmon, and they have a great, I kid you not, tofu that's coated in some nuts. Delicious. Everything you would get there is wonderful, and the desserts are yummy too. There's a vegan banana split. Great
To die for.
to die for.
All right, that sounds delicious. I wouldn't think of ordering the tofu, but after your description, maybe I will. So I think that's wonderful. Now, Christina, if our listeners want to contact you or Susan, maybe they have a Title IX case that they are currently in the midst of and they need some legal assistance, where should they go to connect with you?
Sure. So check us out on our website, studentdefense.kjk.com. We are on Instagram. Our handle's @Stone Suppler. And then we also have a podcast we mentioned earlier. It's Real Talk with Susan and Christina, and it's available on all the streaming platforms. So there's plenty of places to find us. We put out a lot of information. Check us out.
We get around.
I love it. You're a great team. You have great energy. You feed off of each other, and it's almost like you can read each other's minds. So I love the fact that you have a podcast because you guys are totally in tune with each other. This is obviously not your first time talking together. So I love that. And thank you so much for sharing all of this important information. I
Our
think
pleasure.
there's so much confusion. And just like you said, I mean, these regulations are changing literally on a daily basis. And it's just so hard to keep up with all of it. I mean, I wish I could sit here and say that it's easy, but unfortunately it's not. And we need professionals to help guide us in all of these situations. So I'm just so thankful that you're here. I'm thankful that you're sharing the resources with our students. And I'm just, thankful that you're making yourself available when it's needed. So, so thank you for the work that you do. It's important.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Of course. And to our listeners, if you enjoyed this talk with Christina and Susan, be sure that you like it. Be sure that you share it with other college students on campus that might need their assistance. And we hope to see you on another episode of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. Thanks so much for joining us, and we will see you next time.